Hello, and welcome to Handled-ish Productivity for the Imperfect, a weekly podcast for those who want to elevate their productivity but are not looking for perfection. I'm your host, Betsy Hayes, and I am really happy that you are here with me. This is episode 75, and this is about parenting hacks from a handled-ish mom, aka me. Now, full disclosure, I am not a professional anything when it comes to parenting. I am simply an experienced parent who has, I believe, successfully, because they're amazing, along with my village, of course, raised two amazing human beings. And something happened the other day, and I was reflecting on something that was that happened when they were kids, and it sort of reminded me that that was a pretty good call on my part as the mom, and it reminded me of a couple of things that perhaps I did okay when the kids were little. So I wanted to share them in hopes that you might find them useful, you might find them entertaining, or maybe they springboard to something useful for you. Um, so when the kids were little, and we were riding in the car, this was obviously post, car seats. I used to tell them that my car would not start until everybody had buckled their seatbelt. And what was really nice about this is it sort of eliminated all the nagging, right? It was just, I simply stated as a fact, mom's car won't start until everybody's buckled. And so everybody buckled. And especially if it was a warm day, right? There was a little bit of peer pressure that, hey, let's buckle because we want to start the car and get some air conditioning. And, when it was just my kids or my kids and their friends, same thing. My car will not start unless, everybody's buckled. And that worked well for quite some time. No drama as far as seatbelts. And one day it was really funny. We were in somebody else's car, and granted, this wasn't the first time they'd been in someone else's car, but for some reason, this is when they asked the question. And somebody didn't have their seatbelt buckled before the car was started. And one of the kids said, "Hey, their car starts and, so and so doesn't have their seatbelt on. Like, what the heck?" And so I simply said, "Well, they just must have a different kind of car than mom. And, as we know, seatbelts are for safety. So everybody buckle up." And that bought me a little bit of time. So I guess that might be officially lie number two. But then obviously, eventually, everybody figured it out. And now it's a little bit amusing. And every once in a while, they bring that up. So another car related thing was, it actually didn't start that way. It started out with, I believe in simplicity, especially as a parent of young children. And I used to tell the kids, don't smoke, it'll kill you. Just very simple. There was no elaboration. I am very anti-smoking. I believe that was very, instrumental in the death of my father and other people that I really love and care about. And so I believe that nobody should smoke. It is very unhealthy for you. So I used to tell the kids, don't smoke, you'll die. Very simple. And they didn't ask any questions. They thought that was very clear. And so we just went on our way. And then one day we were driving to preschool. And this particular day was one of those in-betweens when you kind of roll down the windows. And so the window was rolled down, and so was the window of the car next to us. It was rolled down. And this person was smoking a cigarette. And someone said from the back seat, "Mom, look, they're smoking and they're not dead." And of course, that person heard them, which, obviously led to a few scowls. Anyway, I immediately rolled up the window, and then we obviously had to have a conversation about, well, yes, smoking is incredibly unhealthy. It does often lead to death. And however, it doesn't happen immediately. So we had to get a little bit more nuanced about that. But yeah, always a hilarious moment to reflect on. The other thing that we did when we were going on road trips, when the girls were little, was everybody got a car bag, right? It was essentially just a tote bag, and they were allowed to put whatever they could stuff in that small amount of space to take and play within the car. And this was before Nintendo Switches and all of those things. Obviously, this is pre-video games in the car, or at least at that point, they didn't have any. And so what was great about this, oh, and it has to be uncensored. That was the thing. Because when we first started car bags, I wanted everything to kind of make sense in the car bag. And then it came clear to me that that didn't matter as long as the kids were happy with whatever was in the car bag. So uncensored car bags, you can put whatever in this particular, bag, and you were in charge of it. Right. And obviously that had to be part of the rule too. Mom wasn't in charge of, packing said car bag, repacking it after we got to wherever we were going, etc. But the self-selection, the a little bit of autonomy and agency, I think really helped. And sometimes they made, choices that were awesome. And well, actually, they usually made choices that entertained them. But the variety of choices in the car bag was also, kind of fun for me to investigate. When when my daughter was little, she had a pacifier. And so when it was time to, move on from the pacifier, I did what is now known to be called, only to me, as the Great Binky Buyout. And again, I do not know if this is good parenting or not, but it worked for me. So I told her, I said, I was living out in the country at the time and going to Toys R Us. This was when we had Toys R Us, was a little bit of a big deal. And so I just, got down on, at her level, and I said, hey, I'm going to Toys R Us. I will buy you anything that you want, within reason. And when I come back, I will trade you for your binkies, all your binkies. And that's what we called the pacifier. And it was really cute. She thought for a little while and said, I want a toolbox with tools. Great, no problem. And I'm thinking, wow, is that going to be, is this going to work? And I was a little nervous about this whole idea, but I decided to, take it to the finish line. So I went to Toys R Us. I got this really cool little toolbox, these little plastic toys, and then I got nervous. And so I also bought her a Caillou doll. I don't know if any of you remember the PBS show Caillou, but I was like, hey, for good measure, we're going to buy her a Caillou doll. So I went home and I said, hey, I got you this toolbox, and hey, I also got you this doll, and, let's exchange for the binkies. And during the day, that was great. She's like, okay, took the toolbox, was not as excited about the Caillou doll as I thought she was going to be. And then, went out and went around and played. Full disclosure, that night was pretty crazy and not very fun without the binky. But after that, everything was great. So the Great Binky Buyout, from my opinion, complete success. Another thing that we did that I think probably is not unique, but if a child is really not excited about mornings, it takes them a little bit while to get up, and you happen to have a pet. It was really nice to just, sit them down on the couch and, next to the dog, and we called it pet therapy. And I actually set a timer and said, before, you do anything, we just want a little bit of pet therapy. And so sat there on the couch, pet the dog. Max, the dog, was super happy. And then after the timer went off, then, we were able to start our day with a lot more peace and harmony, and everybody won. So that was a brilliant idea, which again, I don't think is new, but it worked incredibly well. I also went through with the girls. I mean, when they were little, it wasn't with them, but when they were older, that was actually a better exercise. Twice a year, went through every single thing in their room, all the clothes, all the toys, all the books. Just kind of did a full reorg, because I was not the mom that everything was in its place all the time, and everything had its place when the kids were little. We did the best we could to keep things reasonably tidy, but and after about 6 months, it definitely needed a redo. So in the summer, and then shortly after Christmas, we would go through everything. And then obviously we would have, some things that we weren't going to keep anymore. And so at that time, my parents' church had a thrift store. And so we had a wonderful place to donate those items to. And then everything was, reorganized and really well done for twice a year. And the nice thing about that is if things got a little out of control, I knew it was almost time for another, reorg. And the children really appreciated it too, because especially when they were, involved, they again had agency about making some choices. Sometimes there was a little interim box, right? Like, hey, I'm not really ready to get rid of this now, but I want to think about it. And then that box was brought back out on the next, cleaning situation. And then some things, were just in the I want to keep forever, but I don't really want them in my room anymore, right? And so there was some storage opportunity for that. And not everything, but there was obviously some negotiation. And then the girls also had, what we called the special box, which was basically just a under the bed box where they put, all of their special things that, when they were getting ready to move out of the house, went through and, kept some of it and was like, oh my gosh, why did I keep this scrap of paper? I don't know either. But so it must have meant something at the time. So that was a really cool thing. Um, so a bedtime ritual was really, really great. There was a book that the girls read. It had a bunny. I should have researched that before I started recording, but I think it was called Tell Me Something Happy Before I Go to Sleep. And the kids really loved that book. It was a gorgeous book. Totally recommend. And as a result, that sort of evolved into this idea of happy things. Okay, so whenever it was bedtime, everybody's like happy things, and it was an opportunity to share, a little bit of happy things, and that was sort of an organic offshoot of reading that particular book. And then we also ended up developing this ritual for bad dreams, where we talked about these different tools that the kids could use in order to help them deal with their bad dreams. And that actually was the impetus for the children's book that I published last year. And these were things like looking around your room, noticing that you were okay, quiet singing, because that usually makes people happier. Reading, when they were at the point where they could read or even pretend to read. Changing, thinking about, hey, how would I have liked the dream to end? Let's go ahead and, it's your dream, so your rules, so you could change it if you want to, and stuff like that. So that became kind of a neat thing too. And it became this little chant, tools, tools. And then first tool is, and then, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do the chant to spare your ears, but it really was kind of a neat thing as far as rituals were concerned. And then the last thing I want to share is just this idea of language. I know, families have their different language and their different inside jokes, and all of that is amazing. And sometimes it's good to, provide children with language to describe things that maybe they don't have the words for, right? And one of the things that we used to do is we used to talk about expiration tags when we were out in the world and someone was getting cranky. We would say, "Oh, is your expiration tag up?" And that was just sort of just a low key way to just acknowledge that, hey, perhaps it's time to go home. And obviously, as everybody got older, they were able to articulate themselves, hey, you know what, my expiration tag is almost up. Much better than, just being, cranky or hangry or whatever. And it's actually language that I still use, even when I'm not with my kids. I'm like, hey, you know what, my expiration tag is up. I think I need to head home or whatever. But it just was a really nice way to kind of help them, kind of self-reflect and figure out what they were feeling. And basically it was, you know what, I just really want to go home. And so that was a good thing as well. So yeah, so there's a few parenting hacks from a handled-ish mom. I definitely consider myself a handled-ish mom. I don't think there is a perfect parent. In fact, that would probably not be good for the children, to be honest with you. I think it's really important for our kids to know that we are human and we do make mistakes. And, if we can do that with some humor, I think that works best for everybody. But anyway, would love to hear about, whatever parenting things that you tried and worked for you, and either currently, right? Again, if you're in the middle of raising small kids, or, upon reflection, because I think that's kind of an interesting exercise and could potentially be helpful for lots of folks. So that's the scoop for this week. I wish you the most awesome week ahead, and I look forward to connecting next time on the next episode of Handled-ish, Productivity for the Imperfect. Until then, please take care. And remember, you are doing way better than you think you are. Trust me.